All right, guys, I'm here with the legendary Jacob, better known as Stitch Duran. He's been in the industry for a very long time, got a lot of experience, and hopefully a lot of awesome stories and knowledge to share with us today. Stitch, thanks so much for coming on today, man.
No, thanks, Eddie. I appreciate it. Yeah, you're right. I do got a lot of knowledge and I got a shitload of stories, bro.
For
So
sure.
feel free to ask and, uh, yeah, ask anything. I got
Perfect.
answers for everything.
Perfect. I can't wait to hear everything, man. We'll start, I guess, just from the beginning. So, um, you know, a lot of people know you as the Cutman, but I think you're so much more than that, and you've got so much experience in the industry, in combat sports, in lots of different areas. So let's talk about the beginning, how you even like your first, like your early life, and then into your first experience with any sort of martial arts.
Yeah, it's been a fun road, bro. They actually, just to go fast forward, they just finished filming a 90-minute documentary on my life about 3 weeks ago. And Michael B. Jordan is in it, and Tyson Fury and Shane Mosley and a bunch of guys. And it's basically it's about my life. So it's called From the Fields to the Garden, because I grew up as a farm worker. Those are the fields, right? I tell people, if you ate it, I probably picked it, for every fruit and vegetable out there. That's what I did till I joined the military. Baseball was my big game. So anyway, the film is called From the Fields to the Garden. And my goal was to make it to Madison Square Garden. That's the garden. Been there, done that many times. So anyway, so as I was growing up as a young man, I was a farm worker. So, we always worked in the crops every year. And in fact, the people that they're trying to send back here in the United States, that's me. Those are my people, right? So I'm always fighting for them. And we were talking about it earlier today, how my parents always fought for the rights of the farm workers with Cesar Chavez, which was our guy that started all the revolution. And then, me getting fired from the UFC only because I supported the fighters. And, now this is happening. And, but nonetheless, it gave us the courage to go forward. But baseball was my game. I love playing baseball. And, um, I grew up in a small town, like 1,500 people, all Mexicans, majority of them farm workers, But I walked out to a college that was like 9 miles away from my town, but I had to have a car. So I would go to school with friends and they would leave after school and I would stay in practice and then I would have to hitchhike home. Uh, did that for a little bit. I didn't know about grants or scholarships to continue my education. So I joined the Air Force in 1972 and that was during the Bruce Lee era. So I told myself if ever I went to the Orient, I'd want to study the martial arts. Well, in 1974, 2 years after, they sent me to a place called Thailand. And keep in mind, I'm a young kid, you're right, 19 years old, and I didn't even know what Thailand was. And I had friends that was during the Vietnam War, right? So I had friends that were already stationed there like 3 months before me. So they invited me downtown to Banchan to some fights. So I'm thinking, I'm Mexican, I'm thinking boxing, right? Well, I see my first Muay Thai fight. And the guy, one of the fights, he throws a kick and boom, knocks the guy out. And I said, oh, shit, I'm in. So, but on the base for the GIs, the soldiers, they had Taekwondo. Well, Taekwondo, Thailand, to me sounds like the same. So I started in that, and then the Koreans left, and the Thais took over, and they transitioned us into the Muay Thai system, and with Taekwondo kicks, which worked out great. But I got back to the States and uh, got into boxing just to kind of improve my hands, and stayed in the martial arts and opened up a school of kickboxing with just a crazy credit card, ASK, the American School of Kickboxing, and I trained a lot of the great fighters at that time, and that's how I learned to be a cut man. So 30 years ago in October, I made the move here to Las Vegas to follow my dreams. It's the boxing capital of the world. And at that time, it was only boxing. And then the UFC came, and the rest is history.
That's awesome, man.
It's
Like,
crazy, huh?
yeah,
Yeah.
it's crazy. Your story's awesome
Yeah.
and truly inspiring from where you've come from to where you are now. It's a big inspiration for myself, and I'm sure for everyone listening as well. So, I mean, credit where it's due. You've done great things in the sport and just in your life in general. And I can't wait to see the documentary as well. When is that going to be released?
We just finished. They finished 3 weeks ago.
Okay.
So here's what I'm gonna do. And number
Yeah.
one, yeah, you're right. Everything that's happened to me is a thing that I always like to express it because I ain't no different than you. I'm just one of those guys that happen to be on this path, and I always tell people, and I'll tell you, Sharif, if that line that we're all scared to cross, I tell these young guys, if you don't cross it, you'll never get there. You got to take the pain. Mike Tyson says. I asked him, years ago, I did a documentary. I said, every fighter has that one little thing that nobody has. I said, what's that one little thing? And very simply, he says, take the pain. You got to take the pain. And I've always thought that in human life, to get where you're at, you're out. So anyway, that's how I got started. It just, I did that and got back to the States. And 30 years ago, I made the move to Vegas. I gave my school ASK to one of my students. I sold my house and I got a job transfer and took like a $25,000 a year cut in pay. And I drove 9 hours with my family in a U-Haul and called my mother and says, "Hey, Mom, I got a new phone number." It was that crazy. But you got to believe in yourself,
Sure, for sure.
and your family has to believe in you. That's so key.
Yeah, 100%. Having that support, or whether it be family, friends, or even as a fighter, you need sponsors or any other support. All of that stuff is so important. And I mean, yeah,
You know,
when people believe
it,
in,
it,
yeah,
let me interrupt you
yeah,
because
no, for sure,
everything that you said there was Mike Tyson saying,
mm,
"Take the pain." Because as I left, Sharif, I thought, you know what? That's such a strong statement because not only in boxing but in life, you take the pain in training, you take a pain in the fights, you take a pain with your family, you take a pain financially, and hopefully you don't take pain down the road. But that's everybody's lifestyle. As long as you understand you could overtake those, uh, you'll be in a good position.
for sure. I think a lot of people underestimate the ability, the power of the ability to suffer in the short term for your long term goals.
Bingo.
A lot,
You
yeah,
said it best.
a lot of people, maybe can't cut it, but in order to achieve what you want, you have to, as you said, take that pain, and that's really profound, and it's something that I'm probably going to write down on the
Yeah.
bathroom mirror or something.
Yeah, well, it's true though.
Yeah, yeah,
When you break it down, we're no different. We're all the same,
yeah,
and we all have different dreams, but they're all the same dreams, right? It's to get to the top or do the best. But yeah, you got to take the pain down the road. It doesn't come easy, and it's not supposed to come easy.
yeah,
But also is show the way as you're going, to the others, so that they don't have to have the bumps and bruises that you go through. You
for
know,
sure.
it's
And
pretty easy life, though, once you live it.
yeah, once you get there. um, that move to Vegas, was that in order to further your career as a cornerman, as a cutman?
Yeah, 100%.
What was the main driver behind that? What was the main goal that you? So you opened the kickboxing academy once you came back from Thailand. And did you do that? How long did you do that for before you decided to go into more of the cutman aspect of it? And I guess what made you want to go into that cutman aspect and then pursue
Good.
that fully?
All right, good question. So when I got out of the military, I lived in Oakland, California, across the
Mm-hmm.
bay from San Francisco, and there I got into boxing. In fact, after that, I started working with Andre Ward. Andre Ward was a young man when I
Mm-hmm.
was there. We created the first Golden Glove champions out of that. So I didn't know nothing about training, but I hooked up with a friend, and he taught me the trade of of training. And but I moved to Fairfield, and just with a card, I opened up a school of kickboxing. I tell you, that's when the whole transition started working because I was in the gym, just kind of training, and I had Dennis Alexio, that was the world champion at that time in kickboxing. Came out the movie Kickboxer with Jean Claude Van Damme and all that. He was training there, and we hooked up, and that's how I got into teaching them the kickboxing ways, teaching them, working with them. And from there, we had additional fighters and had some of the best fighters in the world. And that's where I learned to be I had to learn to be a cut man. Had to learn how to wrap hands, had to learn how to be a cut man because it entitled everything, and doing that. So then it was only boxing. All right. And I remember I had I wanted to learn more and more and more. And I went to some fights in Richmond, California. It was about an hour away from my home. And it was boxing. And this one guy got cut, and the Cutman did a good job. So I went over there and asked him, I said, "Hey, look, man, I'm trying to learn to be a Cutman. Can you tell me what you did?" He says, "Fuck you." He goes, "I'm taking this to my grave, and you got to learn like me." And he walked away. I felt about this big, bro. And I said, I'm never going to be like that piece of shit. So my job is to teach and to teach. And now, he forgot. I've mentioned this story hundreds of times, never once threw his name out. Wasn't important. But now that I go back and I'm in the movies and Andre Ward's the undisputed champion in Oakland, I lived in Oakland, right? Now I go back and he forgot about it. But him and his son now want to take a picture with me. So I got my arms around both of them. I said, "All right, you piece of shit. Because of you, I'm giving back."
Yeah,
But that's my nature anyway, is to give back. So, but that's a story. We all define our careers or our lives, a lot of them based on stories, events that happen. How are you going to, so that was a positive. Turn a negative into a positive.
for sure. So that was that like the turning point for you when if he basically didn't tell you to fuck off, would you have wanted to delve much deeper into it, or was that like what kind of lit a fire in you?
Well, I knew to take a shot.
Yeah.
I knew that it was in a different world. I knew they weren't martial artists.
Mm,
That was the mentality of boxing at that time.
mm,
That it was a secret. They were
mm,
going to take it to their grave, and that's still, that's a lot of them still had that stupid mentality. It's
mm.
not even like that. So no, that was just a awakening for me that these are the obstacles, that line that I'm going to have to cross.
Yeah.
And there's been guys. I remember I did a show at Madison Square Garden, with Klitschko. And I get there and I'm in the dressing room and I'm down on my knees. I'm taking stuff out of my bag that has, my cut medicine and all that. And this guy behind me, I don't even see him. He says, "New York is my town. LA is your town." And I turn and look at him. I said, "Well, I live in Las Vegas, but I'm thinking, who is this guy?" He just comes up to me and says, "New York is my town. LA is your town." So I said, well, that's the kind of life that I'm working, you know, but
Yeah.
it's
I
crazy.
mean, there's some interesting characters in the boxing game for sure.
100%.
Yeah.
100%.
So I mean, you've been around the who's who of fighters, coaches, everything. You're one of the biggest names yourself. Um, what have you learned? What do you think's the most important qualities for a coach are based on your experience? Uh, like, what do you think are some of the important qualities that people might overlook?
As a coach,
Yeah.
well, as a coach, you have to understand that everything has its time and place, and how you set things up 2, 3 steps in advance, right? And but teaching is a big, big, big thing, and then having them understand. You break it down. It's a very simple sport, and that's what
Mhm.
Mike Tyson says. Is boxing is a very simple sport. When you break it down, it's mechanics, it's timing, it's balance, and that's why I always tell my kids in life, everything is going to be timing and balance and being in the right position. That's part of the combat sports, right? So those are the things I'm always trying to teach as we go down the road.
For sure, for sure. Um, so then, when you moved to Vegas, then how was that? Did you have something already lined up there, or did
No,
you just kind of start from scratch?
no, no. I started from scratch, bro.
Yeah.
My brother lived there.
Okay.
Like I say, I took a $25,000 a year cut and pay.
Hmm.
So right off the bat, I lost money. But I started working with boxers. I walk into the gym and I would wrap hands for free because
Hmm.
nobody knew me. And that's why I tell these young cut men, every time you wrap somebody's hands, that's like giving them your business card. So I did that. Then I started working with boxers and this and that. And then they started. I didn't go to be a trainer. I went to be a cut man. But as I saw all the coaches there, I'm thinking, man, I can do what they do. I can do what they do. So I started, being that I had an 8 to 5 job with a corporate company. I couldn't be a full-time trainer, but they would call me to do hand pads. And I mean, I worked with a lot of great fighters, and that's how I got a lot of recognition, got a lot of work, but the whole turning point was when Dana White brought me into the UFC. I was there. I mean, I knew Dana way before the UFC. We were always in the gyms training, and I saw him at a K1 kickboxing at the Bellagio here in Las Vegas. and he asked me for my card and called the next day and says, "Look, we bought the UFC. Would you like to be one of the two Cutmen? Leon Tabbs, the original Cutman." And yeah, I came on board, and that kind of changed my life, and got me to where I'm at now. And if you learn how to work cuts, and a lot of cuts, especially in the UFC,
Yeah,
so
with the small gloves for sure. So
yeah.
that was like, so that was like the first major promotion that you were full time on, or was there more things before that?
Well, yeah. Well, in boxing, it's all independent,
Yeah.
right? So, but in working for a group,
Hmm.
that was basically at that time was non-existent.
Mm.
Dana, the UFC are the first ones to literally, well, in MMA, and I give Dana credit for, bringing me in as one of the house cutmen because MMA was such a new sport that coaches don't know how to wrap hands, they don't know how to work on cuts. So he brought in guys from the boxing industry,
Yeah.
and so that helped.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Like, how was you mentioned in MMA, there's a lot of cuts, obviously, the small
Yeah.
gloves, elbows, knees, the ground and pound, whatever else there is. How was that transition going from being a boxing cut man and, wrapping hands for boxing gloves to going to MMA? And what were the sort of differences and the adjustments you needed to make in your techniques or anything like that?
Nah, no adjustments, bro. If it
No?
worked for boxing, it worked for MMA.
Yeah.
That's the thing about it. I had experience already in boxing
Yeah.
coming into working cuts, and that's why Dana knew me. He knew me because of the performance that I did,
Yeah.
and he brought me in for that. But no, I came in with experience, and that's why
Mm.
Dana was smart enough to have done that, and gets to the point now that. And it happens now because I'm a what I did to the UFC I do with Top Rank in boxing now. I'm one of their house cutmen,
Yeah.
and once the guys realize that I'm there, they all want me to wrap their hands. They all want me to work their corner, right? And I understand, you
Yeah.
know. So yeah, so that's how we evolutionized the game of Cutman.
Yeah, that's awesome. You really
Yeah,
did revolutionize
yeah,
the corner there for sure. Um, I was gonna say what you mentioned that the guy that you tried to learn from basically barred you and pissed you off there.
yeah,
So how did you go about learning those skills? Was it just trial and error? Did you have to go to the
yeah. Good,
library and start reading books? Like what? How did you get those skills?
oh, good, good. You're very good at what you do, man.
Thank
Yeah, those are good questions.
you. Yeah.
But no, in those days there was no help.
Yeah.
So I talked to the ringside doctors, all the time. A lot
Hmm.
of the information I got from them,
Hmm.
but looking and examining, and then I came to the conclusion that not everybody knew what they were doing, right? So I would break it down. I'd be in the dressing room. I'd guys be wrapping hands in the other side of the dressing room. I'd be watching their technique, and I'd go home and I'd practice. I'd wrap my own hands, and I'd get on the bag, and if it was too tight or too loose, and I could make the adjustments. And so I did that by watching. There was no education, and same thing with working cuts. You know, I did that, but a lot of it was just good common sense.
Yeah.
But talking to the doctors helped a lot. And
Mm.
then understanding what veins, the medications that you use. And as you're getting into that point, I always tell these education now is the way I want to end my career is making this game a lot safer and smarter. But I tell these young guys, I say, look, if you're looking for a cut man, and if you put the swab in his mouth or in his ear, like the old guys, get another cut man. That's old school.
Yeah.
That's they're following the blind. The blind is leading the blind.
Mm.
But also ask them this one question. For the most part, international, the adrenaline chloride 1000 is the medication that is pretty much universal. Ask the cut man what the medication does. And if that guy tells you that it's a coagulant, get rid of him because that's the wrong answer. The adrenaline chloride that we use on cuts is a vessel constrictor. It closes up the blood vessels. So I always try to educate these young guys, and I'll give you a quick lesson on cuts. So when you see me work on a cut, first thing I'll do is I'll squeeze it. And what I'll do is, keep in mind, you got to think as you're inside the cut. But when you're doing that, all the little blood in the little vessels you're getting rid of, right? So when you put the medication there, it absorbs into the vessels and it closes it. All right. Now, Tim Zoo, Badu Jack, that one big giant cut that they had here, and that's why it's important to have an educated cut man and a corner because they did Tim Zoo a disservice. they should have stopped that fight, because you're not going to stop that cut, because that vein is too big where you're not going to be able to get rid of the blood flow. So the medication don't go in. Very simple in life,
Yeah.
but and keep in mind now, Sharif, is none of us have to be certified to be called professionals. That's what's wrong with this game.
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, that cut on Tim was horrific, but he still tried to power through. But I
Well,
mean,
yeah,
cuts like
that's
that can just change the entire trajectory of a fight. And I guess that's what makes jobs like yours so important. Is you can give that extra round to the guys.
yeah,
Yeah, and part of the reason why I'm so excited to have you on is because I don't have much knowledge. Most of my experience coaching has been in the amateurs, and in Australia we just use like regular boxing wraps. We don't have to tape the hands.
yeah.
So yeah, I want to like kind of learn a bit more about what is like in the tool bag of a cut man. Like you mentioned that
Adrenaline
adrenaline
chloride
swab.
1000.
Yeah,
Yeah,
wasn't really even sure about those things. So yeah,
yeah.
talk me through about like what's in your bag and what each thing is for, and yeah, when you're utilizing certain tools.
Well, I'll do that, but then I'm gonna do something even better.
Mm-hmm.
About 3 months ago,
Mm-hmm.
because people want me to do seminars, and I've
Mm.
done seminars. Mexico City, like 120 people showed up,
Yeah.
40 on Zoom, and I've done one in Austria and Canada, and different places. But my schedule's so busy, so I figured, well, I'm gonna make a video. It's gonna show you everything from wrapping hands for boxing, for MMA, how to work on cuts, the medications, how to work on swelling. Everything that I do detailed that we'll talk about right now. I put it on video, and it's only $50. That's
Perfect.
nothing. It's not for me to make the money. It's to teach you guys.
Mm.
And but that's, you got to know. Go to stitchduran.com and get it. And yeah, I mean, it's not even for the money. I give it to my kids, and they're happy every time. But anyway, getting into that point is yeah, you got to start off understanding what fighters go through physically and mentally. It's a hurt business. The bottom line of a fighter is to render his opponent unconscious. So that's the knockout, right? But as a cut man, or even as a trainer, or even as a fighter, you have to understand what's going to happen. You know, it's a hurt business. But how do you minimize that as much as possible? Remember, I was saying conditioning, timing, balance,
Yeah.
and all that. But as coaches, as cutmen, we have to understand everything, and looking and observing is really, until I put this video out, was the only way. But yeah, ask any questions. I'll try to give you answers.
Yeah, for sure. I guess I seen that I seen a clip of you in the corner of Yoel's corner, and you weren't just working on his face. You gave him some advice that helped him to win the fight, telling him to be more aggressive. So has there been a lot of those moments? I mean, obviously you want to let the head coach do what he needs to do, but has there been a lot of those moments where you've given some advice to a fighter and it helped them? And what are some
How,
memorable
how,
ones?
how did you know about that?
I seen a video of it. When I was watching some things on
Did you hear
YouTube.
me talking to him or what?
Yeah,
See,
it
I
was
didn't
in
know.
Spanish or something. I think it was in Spanish.
All right, so
Yeah,
I'll tell you what happened, man.
yeah,
Is my job as a cut man is not to give instructions. See,
yeah,
that's not my job. My
yeah,
job is to perform, and that's why, like in the movies, I
yeah,
don't say a lot. I
yeah.
don't say anything, just enough to get credentials. But Yoel Romero, um, the first 2 rounds, when I look at fights, I always look at who's winning.
Hmm.
You got to look at the whole angle and every probability and every possibility. So I always judge as who's winning the fights. Well, the first 2 rounds, I kind of gave them to the other guy. So Yoel came into the UFC right when I was leaving out, right? But we knew each other, right? But I told him, I said, in Spanish, you got to get more aggressive. Simple as that. And he went out there and knocked the guy out. So anyway, the week after that, he has a real popular podcast. So he brought me on board. And he says, do you remember what you told me in the third round? And it kind of gave me chills. And I said, yeah, I told you to get more aggressive. So see, he remembered that. And he brought that up. And I didn't know that it was mentioned during the fight. I thought it was just a secret between him and I.
Oh, Well, that didn't mean to expose you, but hey, I mean, it won him the
No, no,
fight.
no,
It won
no,
him the
no. That's
fight, so it was a
yeah. Well,
yeah,
and then the thing about it that makes it even pleasurable now that I know, that it went worldwide, is that he had enough trust in me for him to follow my orders because
yeah.
I wasn't part of his training team and
Mm,
anything like that. No, so I usually when I say something, it's the truth.
hmm. Yeah. And do you do it like so? You said that your job as the cut man is to basically not say anything. Um, is that like how it always goes, or is it depending on which coach you're working with, or like how's the sort of dynamic? How's the dynamic in the corner? Obviously, it's obviously a very high energy atmosphere,
Yeah.
and so how is that dynamic?
Oh, it's good, but and that's a good point right there because like Top Rank, I'm their house cut man. All this started during COVID because I live 20 minutes here from the MGM here in Las Vegas, and during COVID, Top Rank, they called me and they were going to do 16 shows in 8 weeks, 2 shows a week in the bubble at the MGM on ESPN, and they asked if I would be one of the two house cut men. Well, that's the program I put together. So of course it gave me a job and all that. So they liked it and they kept us, right? But in doing that, it gave us a chance to educate people and help them do it and and take care of them as much as possible. So
Yeah, for sure. Um, So, out like, what is some memorable moments that you feel like you've really seen a fighter in a like with a bad cut that you worked on, and that you feel like you almost saved that in the moment? Like, what are some of the worst things that you've been able to help? And like, what's the thought process when you're going through when you see someone with a bad cut? You know?
yeah, no, it's just God. There's been many moments like that, and then I, uh, I guess with a real bad cut, I have to look at Marvin Eastman when he fought Vitor Belfort. This is early on in the UFC. Took a knee and took a big old major cut, and I'm working on him, and I always look at the mental capacity how they are, right? Because they're taking headshots. So I know that they're showing me working on him on the big giant screens because I hear the people reacting, right? So I said, just to catch his attention, I said, Marvin, this is the biggest fucking cut I've ever seen in my life. And like you, he started smiling, right? But I knew he was okay. At that point, I did what I had to do. Uh, there was another one, Andre Dural, boxer, fought Jose Esquetegui. This was the rematch. And Andre was kind of taking the kind of shots that I consider long-term damage, where it comes in here, it comes out here, and down the road it's going to affect you, right? So I'm looking at the doctors and they're sitting there talking amongst each other. I don't know what they're saying, but I go up to Andre during the break and I'm working on him and I whisper, I said, look, the doctors are thinking of stopping the fight. Do you want to continue? And very slowly he says like this, about stop the fight. And the coaches, they didn't know what was going on. Nah, one more round, one more round. I said, no. As long as he said no, I'm stopping the fight. Nobody knew why.
Yeah.
Well, the next day, like 8 in the morning, him and his wife called me and they thanked me for stopping. He says, Stitch, I had nothing in me. And these guys, you mentioned it earlier, you guys are all gladiators. You're not going to stop. That's why you got to have somebody to cover you,
Yeah, for sure.
and I saw his brother last weekend in the fights. And I said, man, Anthony, I want you to, I saw Andre and he gave me a big old hug, man. And this was like 3 months before. He gave me a big old hug and I haven't seen him since then. And this is years, right? He says, Stitch, because of you, I'm speaking as well as I can, and thank you, and I love you, bro.
Yeah.
You don't forget those moments. Vladimir Klitschko, I'll give you another one. Uh, on his last fight with Anthony Joshua, Wembley Stadium, 90,000 people, right? And see, I understand. You got to understand the mentality of a fighter. So I don't see Vladimir Vitelli, and I've been with him for 8 years, till Friday at the weigh-ins because my daughter Carla had just gotten married in the island of Crete. So I got in Thursday night. But I'm there and I'm talking to them, and then finally I put my hand on Vladimir. I said, look, man, don't worry about nothing tomorrow. Take care of you like you're my son. And I leave because I know you guys can't sleep at nights, right? I'm putting the final Vaseline on him right before Michael Buffer does the announcements. All these crazy Brits. And Vladimir looks at me, we're about this far apart, and he says, you could call me son. So, wow, that gave me chills because I knew I got into his mind. And till this day, even though he lost it, was one of the greatest fights he ever had, he said.
Yeah. I mean,
Moments like that. Yeah.
you can see that, the difference just a few words can make on the entire mindset,
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
depending.
those are good examples,
Yeah,
right
yeah,
there.
for sure.
So good question to ask.
The next thing I was going to ask, is, do you have any, like, so is there any techniques that you use when you think a fighter is dazed? Like, I've seen some corners maybe like press on some nerve in the nose or something. Is there anything like that, that you think actually works, or is it all just, myth?
Yeah, the only thing really, I mean, all that, and I don't know what creates that. And somebody in Mexico decided to put a finger there, and other people. That's what I'm saying. Other people
Yeah,
watched it, and they do that. And but yeah, ice is the only thing that really just kind of, because when you put ice on them, when you put ice on your face, it changes your little demographics a little bit. Like
yeah,
you respond to it, and if and keep in mind when fighters get hurt and when they get knocked out, it's like a computer. When you turn it off, it just goes down. So it has to reboot again. And same thing when you take one of those shots. We all got hit with bzz, you get that buzz, right? Well,
yeah,
that's you got to get yourself back into that. So.
yeah. And I mean, you've worked with a lot of some of the best fighters in the world. What do you think, based on your interactions with them, separates them mentally, and like, what do you think makes them great?
Wow. What makes them great? I never look at greatness, Sharif. I look at how they treat me, how I treat them. I work with so many. People say, how many world title fights have you worked? I say, shit, I quit counting long time ago. So when it comes to world title fights and all that, which is great, but it's the heart and soul of a fighter that really affects me, and how they treat me, and how they treat people. Those are the stories behind the scenes. And I did an interview with former world champ Marco Antonio Barrera in Guadalajara, Mexico, and he asked me a question. He says, "Has a fighter ever disrespected you?" And I've never had that question asked before. And I said, "No, because my job is a little bit different than yours. My job is to go and take care of you. Why would you want to go and disrespect me?" So I don't get those kind of challenges.
Yeah, well,
It's
I
crazy,
mean,
huh? Yeah.
you'd hope not.
Yeah, yeah. Well, if I don't have to work with you. I got
Yeah,
options. I'm
yeah,
here to take care of you, and go with somebody. Go with a guy that put the swab in his mouth.
yeah.
Go with a guy
Um,
that.
yeah, you talked about, like, this old school mentality, and like with the swab in the mouth. Obviously, that's not very sanitary. So, what are some of the, like, common mistakes or biggest myths, in the cut man sort of sphere? I guess you could say that, like, the common things that are done wrong, or that, yeah, people get wrong, I guess.
Yeah, well, there's still some techniques that you see people doing wrong, like the KO swell, the metal. You
Hmm.
see guys doing this, right? And the theory there is that what happens when you get swelling, Sharif, is you get blood that's accumulated underneath the tissue. So what these guys, in theory, what they want to do is they want to move it over here, but what you're doing, you're moving it into tissue that's not damaged, and it goes into that, but then it goes right back into that. So in that type of thing, cold direct pressure is what you do. And here's the theory behind that. How many times you get a little cut and then you put your finger on your cut for a minute, right? And then you take it off and it stops bleeding. Well, that's that theory that blood coagulates itself. And so when you do that cold compress, that's the theory, is that you minimize the flow of blood so the swelling don't get any bigger. So that's one of the myths.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's crazy,
Yeah.
huh? But
And
very
when
simple. But very simple once you break it down.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And that's the key, I guess, is, having that knowledge. I always say, like, a good coach will not just tell you what to do, they'll explain why you're doing it. And I think that a lot of people don't understand that.
Yeah, and even I think we were talking it earlier. Uh, my position in the corner, So like I say, with working with Top Rank, I work with a lot of new fighters. So when I work with them, I'll sit down with the coaches and I'll say, "Look, give me the right side of the ring, give me his face. You guys do everything else: the water, the bucket, the stool. You know, just give me his face and give me the right side." and we're good to go. Now, if something happens where he gets cut on the opposite side, then the coach and I would trade places. So all that we established before we even get there, and then that way you work as a team, you know. So
Yeah. Yeah, and I wanted to I wanted to say as well, like with the traditional hand wrapping method, is there like a better way, like something that you see a lot of people do and that you know specifically a better way to do it? Like for example, I'll just go three times around the wrist and then, try and make like an X shape and then three times around the knuckle and just whatever. But is there like you know, something that you think is really important that people miss out on?
well, you got to get the video at stitchduran.com, bro.
Oh yeah.
Nah, that's it. Now you know what, and that's the thing. I tell you, we'll educate you as we go. But whenever you go through wrapping a hand, you're talking about the gauze itself, right?
Yeah.
The gauze, for the most part, you make the padding that's going to go on that through a different row of gauze. But the gauze that you use, you kind of do it evenly, and you don't do it real tight, but you do it snug. And the tightness is going to come with the tape, the application of the tape. That's where you could pull and put pressure on the knuckles. Your number one injuries are your metacarpals. So what you want to do is, you can see this little lump right there. What you want to do is you want to lock these in all the way down. And
Yeah.
and that's why I always tell people, practice on your own hands. That
Yeah.
way you understand what it feels like. That's what you understand what it feels like when you apply pressure, and yeah, practice on yourself. And then unfortunately you got to practice and practice and practice with other people.
Yeah. And so
So
you're trying to like pull the knuckles together. Is that right? Like you're
yeah,
trying
yeah,
to
yeah.
hold
You try
compact
right here.
everything.
Yeah, exactly. Right here,
Okay.
you start applying pressure here, and all the pressure's on top, not on the bottom, because down here you have all these nerves and veins and all that, and you'll stop the circulation. It's not
Yeah.
comfortable, but all the pressure up there, as tight as you can. Yeah,
Interesting. And is there like I've seen there was a controversial technique with how Naya Inoue, the Japanese world champion, how
yeah,
he was wrapping his hands. Some of the op his opponent's coaches, I can't remember who the opponent was, had an issue with how he was wrapping his hands. Is there anything like any forbidden techniques or like dirty things that happen, in
yeah.
that sort of space?
Yeah, I saw, in a way, we were in Tokyo, Japan, New Year's Eve, when the guys were watching the rap hands and all that. That's called
Mm.
stacking. All right, where
Uh-huh.
you put gauze tape, gauze tape.
Yeah.
So when Triple G fought Canelo here in Las Vegas the first time, the manager for Triple G, and we're all friends because we worked with the Klitschko's together, Tom Lawfer, called me and says, "What do you think about stacking?" I said, "I think it's bullshit." I said, "The only reason you wrap a fighter's hands is so they don't break them. As long as the rules and regulations say 1 inch away from the knuckle down, whether you want to put gauze and tape, or gauze and tape, or just gauze and tape, it's up to you, but it makes no difference." So a week later, the commissioner from Las Vegas, he wanted that second fight here in Las Vegas. So he called me because he knows I know how to wrap hands, and he knows I'm fair and honest. "What do you think?" I said, "It's bullshit, Bob." You know. So he came to one of the gyms, him and a doctor, a hand specialist, came to the gyms, and I met with him, and I wrapped his hands one way, conventional, and then the other one stacking. And he didn't feel that much of a difference. I said, "No, there's not. Use the same amount of gauze, the same amount of tape. What difference does it make?" Well, I did the same thing with the hand specialist. He didn't feel that difference. I said, "No, there's not. It's stupid." So now stacking is allowed in Nevada because of the education that I brought to the table. But at the end of the day, no, same amount of gauze, same amount of tape. It's stupid.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, there's another technique with the paddings. Now they're making long paddings, right? And about this long, and then they'll get them, and they'll fold them over. Well, somebody created that years ago, which is fine. Their theory was, when they did it, they would roll it. So it was about this long, and then they would roll it up to the point here, and then put the gauze. Well, that became illegal. You can't do that. So now they started folding it with the same theory that it's going to make it harder when they hit. But keep in mind, I guess, once again, with logic, if you got something very hard on your knuckles and if you're going to hit the wall, it's going to probably hurt your knuckles more than it's going to hurt opponent. See what I'm saying? Because there's
Yeah.
about this much padding on the glove going to the opponent, and there's no padding. So it's there's a lot of theories. I tell you, none of us have to be certified. That's why you gotta, you know, make sure you do the right things.
Yeah, for sure. So, but you don't think it makes much of a difference, like the way that they're wrapping or stacking the hands in general?
No, not a
Yeah.
difference. Now, if I'm gonna knock you out, I'm gonna knock you out.
Yeah.
You know, and the best rap I ever saw, and I have a real good rap, was Philly Trinidad's father. Beautiful, beautiful rap, and I let him know. You know, we fought against him, but I let him know it's nicest rap I ever saw in my life. You know? So
That's interesting. I want to know what you see that makes you think that that's such a beautiful rap. Or was it the technique, or like, what do
yeah,
you look? What are you looking for and seeing like that makes it so beautiful?
yeah. He the technique. I
Yeah.
learned so much off of him watching him because, you know, keep in mind as you look at logic, plywood. All right, plywood is extremely extremely strong because you use so many particles that are
Mm.
meshed together. So it and that's what you do when you wrap a hand. You go this way, that way, different ways. But
Hmm.
Philly Trinidad's dad went this way. And also, he finished this way, right? And I thought that made so much sense because it eliminates it from doing this. So I apply that now. I learned that from him,
Oh,
and that's
interesting.
first. And that's the first guy I ever saw do it.
So, like, instead of cross hatching, you just go more in a
Well,
straight
no,
line.
you cross. You know, I
Yeah.
mean, you do different layers, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, you go across. Well, first I go across, right, and I'll do it very tight, right on the knuckles. I'll go across, and then I'll go this way, very, very tight, away from the thumb. So always wrap away from the thumb. So if you're wrapping, the thumb is like, let's say right here, all right, pull. Then you can pull and apply more pressure, and then you finish up going down. Yeah. That's a beautiful
Interesting.
wrap.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it makes sense. It's the form of plywood, you know.
Mm.
So but keep in mind, a good wrap does not guarantee you're not going to break your hand.
Yeah.
It minimizes the possibility strongly, but it's not going to guarantee that it won't break your hand.
Yeah. And have you
All it
worked
takes is
in?
one shot, and elbow. There's
Yeah.
so many different
Exactly.
angles. So I
Exactly.
work what now?
And you've worked in like obviously boxing, MMA, and various other. Have you worked in the bare knuckle scene yet, or that the
I
dirty?
started.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the dirty boxing champion stuff.
I started with Dave Feldman with the bare knuckle fights,
Yeah.
and then I did all his fights, and then COVID kicked in,
Mm.
and because they live in Miami, I'm in Las Vegas, and we're cross country, and then when they started again, they were still doing shows in Florida, but COVID was still. I said, nah, I'll pass. That's when Top Rank brought us in. So instead of going and working with bare knuckles, I work with Top Rank, and Top Ranks. They're both good, great, great promotions. And Dirty Boxing, I did their last show while
Yeah.
with Yoel Romero, right?
Yeah.
And but I couldn't do this one. I was already booked. So yeah, I've done them all, man. Shit, it's
Yeah.
and they're fun, and it's like say, uh, yeah, they're fun, and it's good to see a lot of the guys I worked with before, you
Yeah, for
know.
sure.
So
And what do you the rap on the bare knuckle? What are your thoughts on that? And just the I guess hitting with the bare hand in general. You're talking.
yeah,
I mean, obviously your main goal is to protect the fighter's hands, but when they're fighting the bare knuckle, they can only wrap. I think like up to the
yeah,
whatever it is there.
right.
So what are your
It's
thoughts on that?
an inch away from the knuckles, and that's a good question. When I was working with them, they want me to wrap their hands. I said nope, because I don't understand that technique. I'm not going to be liable for anything, So but it's pretty much they at the same formula that they would for boxing, without you know a lot of gauze and an inch away from the knuckles, But yeah, it's out of my league, so I didn't even want to get into it.
Interesting.
I
I
know
think
my limits. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, exactly. I think a lot of people misunderstand, like I was saying with those illegal wrapping techniques, that people think that you're wrapping the hands to inflict more damage, whereas like what you've spoken about, your main priority in wrapping the hands is to prevent them from breaking the hands, right?
Number one,
Yeah,
only reason,
yeah,
only reason. Yeah, that's
yeah,
stupid. It's only reason. If I'm gonna knock you out, I'm gonna knock you out,
yeah,
right? But like in Thailand, you guys would put glass and all. Well, that's a different category, right? Entirely different, right? They would put rope and all that shit, but that's old school. That's old traditional. stuff that she would stay in the jungle. You know?
Yeah, for sure.
So yeah,
Well, there was a fighter. I can't remember what his name was, but he put the concrete plaster in his gloves or something like that.
that was
That was
Antonio Margarito
yeah, Margarito. Yeah.
yeah, with that was his name. But yeah, they called me.
Mm,
ESPN called me and asked me what I thought of that. And I said, well, look, with Miguel Cotto, I said, well, look, here's whenever there's a championship fight or any type of fight, what we do is when the fighter comes and he sits down, we already got everything laid out. You got the strips that go between the fingers. You got the tape, the gauze. You got the padding already laid out on the table. Well, what had happened with Margarito is his coach went into the bag and pulled out the padding that he had done and made in, I guess, in his room. And evidently there was some kind of substance in between that made it hard. And so anyway, he asked me what I thought about it. I said, no, he did the wrong thing. I don't know what he did, but there was no reason for him to reach into his bag to pull out the padding. So, yeah.
yeah, it's crazy that something like
But
that happened.
that that's and let's go deeper into that now, Sharif, because that's just the mentality of people that are not certified and don't know about the game. They look at different little things that's going to give a fighter an advantage. There was one Hall of Fame coach out of Mexico that was working a fight, and he had some string that looked like dental floss, and his fighter got cut, and he puts that string inside the cut, and I'm looking and I'm thinking, what the hell is he doing that for? Somebody must have told him, must have, look, man, if you do this and that, it'll stop the bleeding. And then he gets the little thing and he pulls it out. It was the stupidest thing I ever saw in my life. And when I worked with Diego Corrales, when he fought Jose Luis Castillo the second time, one of the guys in the dressing room comes up to me, goes, hey, look, man, I got this swab here that will stop a bullet, and it was black on the cotton, and I said, nah, I'm not going to use it. I don't even know what it is. But I asked one of the doctors, and it's silver nitrate. I guess it's what it was. And what it does is burns the tissue. And so stupid things like that, it's just because somebody tells them that this works and they'll use it whether there's any proof or not.
Yeah, and because, like you said, there is no real way to get certified to be a cut man at this
No.
stage, right?
No. And then even when I do seminars, uh, I don't certify nobody
Mm,
because I don't want you to be the guy, oh, yeah, Stitch showed me how to work on cuts, showed me how to wrap hands, and then you go and jack it up.
mm.
Takes time. That what I do when I do a seminar is just the base of what we do. And then from there, you plant your own seed.
Yeah, I guess it's hard to regulate an industry like that where there's so much liability, I guess.
Now, yeah, and those things you got to
Yeah,
look at.
yeah, yeah.
There was just last week I met with a dentist that has these form-fitting mouthpieces that he wants me to use my name, right? So I met with him and all that. Can you boil and you put and all that? But then talking to my wife, I said, nah, there's too many liabilities in that. Somebody get burnt with hot water. Somebody get knocked out and blame it on the mouthpiece. So that's one project I'm staying away from.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess you got to really take those things into account.
Yeah.
What would your advice be for someone who's trying to learn? I mean, obviously you've got your videos available now, which I'm sure I'll check them out, and I'm recommending everyone else to check them out. I mean, from the legend himself. But what are some other things to try and get into that sort of get into that industry and start learning?
You got to be in the trenches.
Mm,
I get messages all the time, texts, emails, people, doctors, paramedics, nurses, EMTs, housewives, husbands. Everybody wants to do what we do. But I tell them, look, here's what you got. You got to spend hours and days and weeks and months and years in the gym, working with these guys, being one of these guys, understanding the physical, the mental. Then you go in there and you wrap hands for free. It might take you a year, 2 years to have somebody have that confidence and say, you know what, Sharif, I want you to come work my corner. I want you to work my fights. All that takes time. And if you do it for the money, you do it for the wrong reasons.
yeah, for sure. Well,
Yeah.
I mean, the passion has paid off in the end for you, but you can definitely tell it's been a passion project.
Yeah, and it's it's never been about money, bro. I mean,
Mm.
I always tell my kids when I die, I want to die broke. I want my family to enjoy it. I want to enjoy it, and those are uh, those are the benefits of doing what I do. But this is my passion. Never been about the money. No, I'm not stupid. It's a business. And I've created a business, and I'm taking advantage of it. And using it to my ability. But that's not why I'm doing it. I'm
Yeah.
just that's my springboard. I want to create something to where my kids could continue the program as we go on and continue to teaching. And my daughter Carla, she's working a lot with a group with uh, brain damage. So she's getting into that field, and she's pretty active with that. And so helping fighters, man, that's how we want to end our careers.
Yeah, I think when you pursue something with good intentions, doors will open up for you, and the way will kind of open up when you have good intentions at heart, and it definitely sounds like that in your
Yeah.
case. But you talk about the future, and you know um, with your kids wanting to continue this sort of this what you've built. What is the ultimate goal like with this with everything? Do you want to like make everything safer for the fighters and whatnot? Like, what is your ultimate goal?
Well, we're talking about it before we got on the air. About 25 years ago, I was nobody. I was still Jacob actually in those days. But I did an interview on how I wanted to do videos. So that's always because I'm a martial artist first before I am into the boxing game. In the martial arts, our job is to teach, right? And so that's always been my goal. But I always wanted to do videos. So this young guy, he read the article, and he had John Bartonhouse had just graduated from the American Film Institute, and he says, "Look, I need the practice, and I'd be glad to help you out." So anyway, him and I, we're going to do one on Wrapping Hands and all that, but we got so many, so many, so many interviews uh, that we put a documentary together called Boxer's Nightmare. And it deals with all the shit that fighters went through then. But we never did nothing with it because I was nobody. I went to HBO, I went to Showtime, to Don King, to Bob Arum, but they didn't want to hear it, right? So I did nothing with it. Well, John passed away like a year ago, and I hadn't seen this film in 20, 25 years, Sharif. And I looked at it and I said, wow, everything that I captured here, interviews from these legends, half of them are dead, half of them but they're all Hall of Famers. I got Mike Tyson before he got his tattoos, Eddie Mustafa Muhammad, Fernando Vargas, world champions. I got Mills Lane, Richard Steele, Joe Cortez, legendary referees, Emmanuel Stewart, Chuck Bodak, legendary Cutman, Joe Lewis's daughter. I got all these people in this film, and we talk about all the dangers that these fighters go through with pension plans, with insurance, with dehydration, with punch drunk syndrome. All these guys had an answer for all the questions that I asked. And I thought, wow, man, now that I've accelerated to the point where I'm at now and I almost want to, how do I finish up my career? What I want to do now is once this documentary for my life we're working on that. We're done with that. Is I want to get new interviews and now it affects MMA. The same stuff that was going on in boxing 25 years ago is happening with MMA, and nobody's doing nothing. Mark Ratner, now that works, he was one of the commissioners here in Las Vegas. And when I interviewed him, he says, well, first of all, I asked Mike Tyson, Mike, every fighter, or what do we do to help these fighters out? He goes, guys like me, Holyfield, Lennox Lewis, Oscar De La Hoya, when we fight, let's get some of our money. Let's give it to these guys. We don't need it. We're taken care of. All right. So you could build an insurance program with that. So let's say Sharif is in the gym and you're punching and boom, you hurt your hand. Well, you go to the hospital and under that insurance for the boxers, they pay for it, right? Could be a simple solution, right? Well, Mark Ratner, that was a commissioner here in Nevada, also says the money comes from the pay-per-views. But if we sold it to these companies, that look, you're charging $99.99 for charge $100 extra, and let the people know that this dollar goes to help these fighters through dementia, whatever the situation is. So there's money to be raised, right? And I was talking about it today. Once I get this program going, the person I want to touch base with is Jake Paul, because Jake Paul I've worked 4 or 5 of his shows. against him, against his brother. With Mike Tyson, with KSI, and Anson Gibb and these guys. But he's willing to go forward, and he has the guts to go over there and help change the game. But the game has to be changed. It's never been changed. And this film that I did 25 years ago kind of amplifies that, because everything that they talked about is still happening now, and now it includes MMA.
Well, yeah.
It's
That's
crazy.
crazy. It is
Yeah.
crazy. And the fact that you highlighted those issues so many years ago and it never made air, but fighters are still struggling with that. It shows, the sport's become bigger than ever, and fighting has been generating more money than ever, but the fighters still are struggling with the same problems. So
100%.
yeah, I mean, something that could potentially, help out guys that are struggling, and there's a lot of them in this game, would be awesome. And I think I've heard Jake Paul talk like something in an interview about like some sort of a fighter union and calling out, fighter pay in certain organizations and whatnot. Is that like essentially what it is? Like, would it be sort of like a fighters union? I mean, is
Yeah,
that
well, it's
yeah?
it's it's you know it's you it's and they're all words, but a
Yeah.
union is because they're all independent contractors.
Mm,
Shit, bro, you call it an association. It's the
yeah.
same thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's no difference. But the thing is to have some organization where, okay, let's say taxes, let's say you fight and you need to know how you're going to fill out your tax forms. What do you got to pay? Well, there's going to be a link to where you could be able to go, and they'll help you in those certain, business aspects.
Yeah.
There's just so many, how do I do this? So there'll be, different areas, but based off of one big company. Let's say the ABC, whatever the situation, however you want to name it,
Yeah.
but it'd be funded by fighters, promoters, and everybody. Everybody should get into it. This guy Turkey Ali Sheik, that is spending major money on boxers. He needs to look at deep inside of what's going on in the game, because he just enjoying the fruits of the labors that these guys have done. But let's get to the trenches where these guys began.
Yeah, for sure. So like, I guess your ultimate goal is then to like, I guess, give fighters that support network that they might not have access to.
100%,
Yeah.
100%. Yeah, and even just if they learn.
Mm,
Like Turkey and Ali Sheik and Dana White. They want to change what they call the Muhammad Ali Reform Act bill, and that bill was designed as a breakdown to how you take care of fighters. And so they want to challenge one of the areas there where they could create their own world champions and basically their own association like the UFC.
mm.
So those are issues.
Yeah, but there's a lot going on in the political side of boxing.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah, well, Turkey has put on some great fights, so
Well, the fighters, I
yeah.
mean, well, I did the one in New York.
Yeah.
That was horrible.
Recently, the one in Times Square, was it? Was that
Yeah,
like
that's the one in Times Square. I worked with
yeah,
Devin Haney,
yeah,
and it was so disorganized. The
yeah,
dressing rooms were 2 blocks away in a hotel. And when it was time for us to fight, Devin would get in one car with a commissioner, and then we would all follow in a van up to the arena. And then just ended up I had to pay my own hotel bill and all that shit. So, yeah, just because you got money don't mean you're good at what you do.
yeah. I heard like from people who were like spectating and just people commentating on it that it was a bit of a weird vibe for that show. I
Yeah,
think it had no crowd, right?
it had very selected crowd, but
Yeah,
that's the thing about it with all those lights that they have in
yeah,
Times Square. I'm surprised that they didn't put it up there, or I don't even know if they did. For the fans outside of the gated area.
yeah. A bit of a interesting concept, I'd say.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Um, so Stitch, we'll start to wrap up. Is there anything specifically that you feel like you want to bring up, you want to talk about that you might have missed out on that you think is important for anyone listening that's interested in combat sports, coaching, fighting to know?
I think you covered everything, my man. You did a good job. Congratulations. Very, very good interview. And yeah, you know what? I mean, it's plain and simple. You know, we do it because of the love of the sport, not because of the money. And,
Sure.
and I think as long as you continue doing that, you'll be quite successful. And take the pain, as Mike Tyson says. We got to take the pain. And being a martial artist, I always look at life as a yin and the yang, a negative, a positive, right? And that's the way it is. Taking the pain, that's the negative and the positive.
Mm.
And but there's one saying, as a martial artist, and I told this young kid yesterday that that you as I'll give it to you regarding your parents, but the old martial arts saying is that when the student, which is you, does better than the master, which is your parents, then the master has done their job, right? So seems like the master's done your job, So now you got to do it to your kids and pass it on. So that's it's a very humbling statement, but it's a very true statement.
For sure. And I think, in life, as a coach, as a parent, as any sort of mentor figure, the ultimate goal should be to get your mentees to be better than you. So, yeah, that's a very profound statement to wrap up on.
Yeah, yeah, and then just let me finish up. But you're talking about Australia. I
Mm.
loved working with both Andrew and what's the other, Jason?
Jason, yeah.
Yeah, and Maloney here during the
Yeah.
bubbles,
Mm.
and good kids, man. And so yeah. But I love going to Australia. I was there many times with the UFC, and you know. But it's nice not to travel as much.
Yeah, it's a long flight for you.
Oh yeah, it is.
Yeah.
All
Yeah.
right, my man. Well, good luck. Congratulations, and
Awesome.
anytime we could do it again,
Yeah, for
yeah,
sure. I'd love
touch
to,
base
man.
with me.
I really appreciate, again, you coming on. It's been an honor for me to have a chat with you, be able to pick your brain a bit. Definitely learned a lot and heard some interesting stories. And yeah, I honestly really enjoyed this. Definitely my favorite episode to date.
Cool. All right. Well, listen, do me a favor one final
Yeah.
time is, I got your email, huh?
Yeah.
I'm going to send you Boxer's Nightmare. All right. So
Okay.
take a look
Awesome.
at it. I mean, this was done on a zero budget. This was done only with passion. This was done only with a young guy that was just starting off in film.
Yeah.
And I knew shit about film, bro. But
Man, I really appreciate that,
I
honestly.
ended up with, well, you'll see. And let me know what you think about it, but I'll send it to you and
Sure.
take a look at it.
I really appreciate it, Stitch. That's awesome. That's
All right.
awesome.
Yeah. So
From
you can
just
learn off of that,
yeah, for sure.
So,
Thank you.
all right, my man.
Thank
All
you
the
so
best.
much. Have a good one.
Thank you.